through them probably pretty quickly. The first one was talking about cycle class for beginners. Susie was asking about her gentle cycle class, and she was trying to figure out how to dial it back without making it boring, which I totally get. It's hard for us to remember, too, what it was like when we were beginners, so that can be tricky. A few tips for you, Susie, to make that beginner's class fun for people. I think first and foremost, you have to make them comfortable. So the people that are coming in, you want to give them extra time helping them set up their bikes, because they're probably going to do it wrong. So even the people that think they're all good, make sure you check them and adjust. Make sure you ask for injuries. If it's an older crowd, especially, you want to make sure you know, do they have wrist issues? Do they have shoulder issues? Do they have back issues? All that good stuff, so that you can tell them what not to do, on the bike. Make sure you give a nice long warm-up, too. So a lot of this stuff, it's going to be slow, right? You're not going to do a lot of out-of-the-saddle movements. You're not going to do a lot of jumps. I wouldn't do any jumps, actually. It would be, progressive intervals in the saddle, maybe like long endurance flats, maybe slow climbs, all that stuff. And it can feel like it's boring, but I think where you spice it up is in your music and in your cueing. So I would really focus on educating them. Tell them, first of all, at the beginning that it's their ride. They can do or not do anything that you're doing up there in the saddle. You don't have to do they don't have to do what you're doing if they're not comfortable with it. If you do take it out of the saddle and they don't want to, let them know that it's totally fine to stay down in the saddle. Teach them, things like how to read their screens, what those numbers mean to them. I'm assuming that you have monitors. If you don't, you can try and show them how to count RPMs or any of that good stuff using the beat of the music. Teach them what power is. Teach them not to take all the resistance off their bike and just speed up their legs, that does nothing for them. So I actually like slower classes like this, beginners classes, where you're just easing them into it because you can really educate them, right? It's probably the first class for a lot of the people that come to this. You want them to, one, feel comfortable on the bike, comfortable enough that they want to come back, and two, make them feel like they learned something and that they accomplished something. And that's easy to do because you have a lot of knowledge to share. So I think, did you say, I don't know if you said if it's a 30-minute class, oftentimes these are. So it's already pretty short. You're not going to bore them. Just keep educating them. Focus on form. Like I said, limit out of the saddle stuff. Don't do anything crazy. And just make sure, too, that you understand what their goals are. Depending on what the crowd is, and you can gauge that when they come in, but maybe go around and ask them, like, why did you show up today? Is this your first class? What are you hoping to get out of it? And then it'll give you a better idea of what you want to do in the class. I know it might feel boring to you, but it's not to someone who's new to cycling. So just keep that in mind. Kayleen is our only other question today. She asked about recovery time. How much. She said, my classes are only 30 minutes, so when I offer more than 30 seconds to a minute, I feel everyone's eyes burning a hole in my head. I totally get that. People like to be pushed. The last thing you want to do is have people walk out of your class feeling like, one, they didn't get a workout, or two, they didn't understand why it wasn't super hard. So if you're doing like a recovery kind of workout, they have to understand that. So for that, I would just say, Kayleen, you've got to read the room. When you're doing hard efforts, it doesn't really, there is no defined amount of recovery. It depends on the goal. So if you do something like a Tabata, where you're 20 seconds on, 10 off, 8 times, very hard, they're going to get out of breath. They're going to be exhausted. After that, they're probably going to need a decent amount of recovery to be able to do anything else. You could finish with that, and there's that option. But if you want to get them all the way through the class, you have to gauge how they're doing. It's going to differ. You're going to have some people that are extremely fit and recover very quickly after a hard effort. And then you're going to have some people who take 3 minutes, 4 minutes, and they're still not back to where they need to be to push for another effort. So I would just say vary it. you know, you don't want to come out of the gates right after a warm-up with a crazy Tabata or something like that. You ease them into those intervals, but make sure that you gauge the room and see if you're shortly after the warm-up and you're pushing your first interval and people are struggling to recover from it, then you're probably going to have to give them a longer time. So I often do that where I set up a class and then I'm gauging my room and it's not working and I need to adjust on the fly. That's totally fine. Just make sure that you're giving people, before you start that next interval, you're giving them enough time to recover. Now, I don't think that there's I mean, some people will tell you that, you know, an equal amount of push, equal amount of recovery, like 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off, 60 seconds on, 60 seconds off. Some people will tell you need 1.5 times of a recovery. It, again, really depends on what you're trying to do with the class. So if you're only doing one really hard effort and it's at the end, I don't think you need to have a huge recovery because they're going to be going into their cool down. If you're doing a ton of intervals that whole day and the goal is to keep them in it and keep them pushing and keep that power number at a certain number, then you got to kind of gauge, again, where that recovery is. So I don't know if that was helpful. I know I was all over the place. If the other thing I'll just say is if you're doing repeated intervals, so you're doing the same 30 on, 30 off 3 times in a row, and then you're doing that 3 times, let's say that, and you're looking for the amount of recovery in between those, you really want people to get back to a comfortable place, give them a nice flat road for a while so that they can push equally as hard as they did in the first one, if not more so. So again, it's very hard, it's very subjective, it's very dependent on the individual's fitness level. You'll get a better gauge of it once you see how your class responds to whatever you decide to do, and then you'll adjust as you go. So hopefully that was helpful. That's all I got for you guys today. Slow day with questions. If you have more, I'll answer them next week. Post them in the comments or post them in the group. Otherwise, I will see you guys next Thursday. Have a great rest of your day and rest of your week. See ya.